Hello guys and welcome to this tutorial. This is a tutorial about edge pattern shifting and heel and toe shifting, and this is aimed at absolute beginners or even intermediate level players. If you are new to sim racing and if you are new to Assetto Corsa, you are just starting out, I'm going to have a very easy section on the video and I'll be starting with that, and then I will move to a little bit more advanced section. But to start out we are going to do the easiest thing possible. So as you can see, I have a little bit of a different angle so that you guys can see my body movements and my shifting while doing the heel and toe with the pedals as well. And at the same time we are going now to go into the preparations so that you guys can choose the content that is easier for you. So my choice of content and the reason I chose this content, I went through some information regarding the base game of Assetto Corsa. So if you don't have access to mods because you are on a console, or if you are on a PC but you have no mods installed yet, do not worry, I found a car and a track combo that can be used right off the bat as soon as you install Assetto Corsa, especially if you get it on a huge sale like for €1 or €2, something like that. It's just insane the value you get out of that. And so I found historic Silverstone track for a reason. This is an old version of the track from '67. The corners are pretty wide, you have lots of room on the track, and the corners are more or less always 90 degree, almost like a city circuit, but with room outside, a little bit more room for you to maneuver. And because of that, these corners should be easiest. This should be the easiest track possible to race against the AI on the base game. At the same time, the car that I found to be interesting for this will be this BMW M3 E30, because this was a touring car from the DTM era. This car can be found many times on online servers and in online races, even in sim racing system or World Sim Series, stuff like that. I was able to find recreations of DTM races where this car was present for online racing in multiplayer against other players in many servers. So this is always a nice car to learn and to pick. This is also a race car instead of a road car. Because of that, the car will be a little bit more grippy and you can mess around with the setup a little bit more and make the car a little bit more tailored to your driving style or easier to drive for you. I will also provide a setup. I can set up this car a few different ways, but the setup I'm aiming to provide will be a setup that should make the car easy to perform the tasks that we are going to be performing, and at the same time I want you to be able to learn the shifting and the heel and toe part the easiest way possible, so that then we can start to go into more complex and advanced things. So the logic that I have for learning a new skill is that we want to simplify everything as much as possible and learn little by little instead of trying to overwhelm ourselves and throwing ourselves down the deep end. So instead of throwing ourselves into the most difficult situation possible, we should aim to perfect the shifting just isolated and start with the shifting itself. You could even use the drag strip track, but that could be a little bit too boring because we have no turning and you are just starting the car, shifting up and down. That should be a little bit boring. But by being able to turn a little bit the car and actually worry that we are getting close to a corner, we should be able to perfect a few things that are related to keep the car stable while entering to a corner. And this will already tie into the next thing, which will be being able to race this car against an easy level AI, something like that. So let's get right into it. Before I forget, these are the conditions that I've set up for the hot lap. I'm not even using sol, but I'm using the standard hot lap settings so that we can actually always replicate the same experience. The temperature around 15 should be more or less what we can find in race conditions, and so let's just jump right in. So here we are guys, now I'm going to showcase the setup. This is a pretty simple setup. You always need to adjust the pressures. If you are new to Assetto Corsa or to sim racing, always think that you need to adjust the pressures regarding the temperature of the track for optimum grip, and sometimes that can be the single most important factor in any adjustment you can make to actually be able to be quick on the track. So these are the values, nothing too crazy, it's quite a simple setup. And the setup allows for a lot of rotation. So always remember to save the setup with information regarding the temperature and the laps of fuel that you have. Now here I'm showcasing that I'm only using the stock apps that come from Assetto Corsa. So if you are in a console or if you don't have any mods installed in the Assetto Corsa on PC, you can actually have a similar UI and similar information. That is why I'm using the stock app that displays that my tires are at 28 psi. So here I'm displaying the stock tires app, and this app is very important because the color of the pressure in PSI will tell you if you are with too much pressure or the pressure is too low. With green it means that you have optimum pressure. Sometimes the tire temperature might not be ideal, but at least you get the pressure right by adjusting it on the setup. That can be always the first thing to be the most important thing regarding the car setup. So enough with that, let's start driving. And as you guys can see, shifting up, slowly shifting up, you guys can take a look at the telemetry. So this car is very forgiving and you actually don't really need to do heel and toe to downshift. I can show it now to you guys. So I'm going to be just braking and I was able to downshift. It's not really ideal. Oh, I didn't look where I was shifting. So it's not ideal to not do heel and toe, but you can actually do it. You saw that I had a little bit of a correction because the rear tires will want to lock when you do this kind of shifting, because you are not actually rev matching the gears properly. So the rear end is pretty stable. This is one of the easiest cars. You just press the clutch and shift. If you try to shift without pressing the clutch, you can actually damage the car. So we are damaging the gearbox, and now we are not damaging the gearbox, as you guys can see. So this is the first thing to always have in mind, that you need to actually press the clutch. So the next thing that we are going to be thinking about will be now starting to practice heel and toe, because even though it might not be perfect the first few times, you start doing it by practicing it. And because this car is very forgiving and it's very beginner friendly, you can actually practice heel and toe without worrying too much that you are going to wreck the car because of that. The first most important thing coming into any corner is to actually brake, and brake to the maximum amount of grip that you have available. It might be here, it might be here, it might be somewhere here. So, but at the same time, when we are downshifting, let's pretend that we are in 6th and we want to shift downwards, we need to actually press the two other pedals at the same time. So you will be pressing the clutch and this we press the clutch and the accelerator at the same time. You don't need to worry about pressing the acceleration, the gas pedal all the way down, sometimes around 60-70%, or even just the middle. If the car is powerful enough and the engine is quick enough, it will rev the engine up really quickly, and you don't need to worry about pressing the accelerator too much. You can use the heel of the foot, but you can also use the side of the foot sometimes, like this. Be careful when you are using the side of the foot to do heel and toe. Sometimes you get used to it, and when you are braking you always accelerate a little bit. Sometimes even if you don't want to accelerate, you just end up pressing the two pedals at the same time, and that can be a bit messy because then you don't decelerate, you don't lose as much speed as you want to, and you go into the corners a bit too quick and you start to lose the car, and sometimes you don't even notice it. You need to look at the replays and see that you are pressing always the accelerator when you brake. So it's easy to get into the habit, so therefore I'm already telling you so you don't develop that as common bad habit. So the first thing that we are going to do now is, having practiced a little bit with the car just stationary, and now that you have a feeling for the movement with your feet and with your legs, we are going to be getting the car up to speed. Let's see. The tires were cold already. So I'm going to be getting the car up to speed, and now we just go for a few laps of heel and toe technique. Even though it's not really needed, it will be very helpful anyway. The car will be a bit more stable going into the corners. So here we have the first chassis. You see, it's pretty quick. After you practice the movement slowly, you see that you just press the clutch. It's almost just like a kick. Here. Don't forget to always brake enough for the corners. Sometimes we end up focusing so much on one technique and we forget to actually brake for the corners or actually position the car in the racing lane. So here again. And I just trail brake enough to get the car rotated with around 50% braking. Maybe the force feedback is a bit too strong to practice this. And now big braking zone. Don't worry if this doesn't come right at the start. Always think that you need to press the clutch. I almost misshifted. And on every track that you want to drive with the manual gear, it will be always a little bit more work than driving with the paddle shifters. You can also do heel and toe with the paddle shifters as well. I think I have an app that allows me to do that. Oh, I need to disengage the H pattern shifter right now. So I'm going to shift with the paddle shifters now, so that you guys can see. The thing is, I'm not using the right hand here, instead I'm just pressing shifts on the steering wheel. I'm going to shift up again. Now I'm going to do heel and toe with paddle shifters here. So at the same time I'm pressing the paddle shifter, I'm also just braking a little bit and pressing the pedals. I didn't even lift the throttle this time. So again with the paddle shifter on this side. Usually with paddle shifters it's a bit easier. So now I'm going to put the force feedback a bit weaker and I'm going to start using the H pattern shifter again. And the reason we are doing a hot lap is that you can actually try to improve your technique and compare yourself. So now I've just configured the race. So we have 8 opponents and I had some random skins from the guys that raced against me in the online servers, so I'm going to go with that. Aggression is almost maxed out, I hope we can survive that. And it's going to be just a 5-lap race, so all the things that I'm showcasing here, I would recommend them not only if you are learning to use the clutch and to learn heel and toe shifting and edge pattern shifting, or even just pedal shifting with the clutch. This should be the easiest race possible you can get with Assetto Corsa base content. And so now that I have the setup, I think you could make the car a little bit less tail happy if you actually raise the value here on the rear toe. So if you raise the toe into the positive side by clicking down into a lower number, the rear end of the car will be less prone to inertia movements and to rotation. But I kinda enjoy having a very tail happy car. I think I'll have a little bit more rotation on the rear end of the car to help me out.
Yeah, boy.
I don't even have any idea if the AI will be much faster than me, especially because I'll be using the H pattern. Let's start this race against maxed out AI. I don't recommend that you start with the AI so high, but at the same time I'm up for some fun challenge driving with H pattern shifter against some very competitive AI. Whoa, I have to defend the inside. I forgot I have Assetto Corsa on. This might be the only add-on that you guys don't have on console.
Surprise, motherfucker.
You can look into the arrows still. Oops, I'm going wide. But I need to start accelerating as soon as possible. I felt like I wanted to shift up with my fingers, but I ended up just shifting up with the H pattern. So here it's a big braking zone. And after the apex we just got the power down. It should be pretty easy to replicate what I'm doing here, so that you guys can have a fun race. I'm almost messing up myself because I'm driving and talking, and this is not very usual for me. If I'm actually doing a more competitive and serious race, I end up trying to just focus on the race. And I think we are managing to get away from them. A little bit of ABS. I think it was the pink lights on the steering wheel telling me I was activating ABS. So next time I gotta be a little bit more careful with the speed I'm entering that corner. I think this can be the easiest way to practice shifting and heel and toe with the clutch. The corners are always very easy, you always have lots of time to get mentally prepared for the movements that you need to do. You see, you have very easy to see markers on the grass actually. And many of the corners it's easy to just coast a bit, you can brake a little bit earlier, coast a bit more. There are plenty of sections of the track where you just turn the wheel and keep your foot down. And I'm still gaining time on these AIs. The last corner you don't even need to brake much, just keep the momentum up and try to not understeer into the grass. Here I lost a little bit of stability with the car, so the track is a bit bumpy, and that can be a bit fun, trying to understand how much grip can you get in the bumpy parts. It's always fun to actually drift the rear tires of the car, so as you guys can see, nothing too difficult. I'm beating the AI quite easily. I thought I would have a little bit more trouble getting used to the H pattern. So if you are an absolute new beginner to Assetto Corsa, this should be the easiest race to do and replicate, as you guys can see. And you can always learn a little bit how to do the heel and toe shifting down into these corners. We have plenty of time to get ready for them. and at the same time you can always learn as well how to counter steer, because it's easy to feel the rear end of the car going away or sliding.
Nope.
You can always hear the tires sliding away. Now this was a much better corner. My times with this car are pretty slow around here. I'm like 5 seconds away from world record. So I improved on the first corner, then I messed up on the second corner, but now you guys get an idea of how to actually do this. I'm back, guys. Now that we did the easiest part with the easy race, I'm going to be explaining a little bit of a more advanced concept, or explaining better why do we need to do heel and toe technique on certain cars to avoid locking up the driving axis. And I'm going to start out pretty simple. Let's say we are traveling in the middle of 5th gear. We were about to reach top speed on our car, and we were traveling close to 9,000, between 8,000 and 9,000 RPM. So this was the speed of the engine. Here, this line is the speed, and this is the RPMs. The speed of the car, I mean, and this is the speed of the engine itself, or the RPMs that the engine is revving. And so, let's say we are going to be braking. We are braking into a corner, and we are going to be traveling between 100 and 150, something around here. So because we are traveling at 130 kilometers, you would ideally want to go into 2nd gear. And as you notice, 2nd gear at this speed will also require the same amount of RPM from the engine. And what happens is, as we are braking, the moment that we release the accelerator, and because we have only the foot on the brakes, the engine RPMs will be going down. And so, let's say that the engine went down to 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs. In this stage, the speed that the car will want to go will be something around here, less than 100 kilometers. And what happens in this situation is, if you engage the clutch in this moment where you are with the speed here, but your RPMs are here, what happens is there is almost a 40 kilometer difference between the speed that you are traveling and the speed that the car wants you to go. The engine will be working at a speed that when you engage the clutch and you engage the 2nd gear, that speed would match the 90 kilometers, not the 130, something like that. And so that difference of less 40 kilometers, when you shift into the 2nd gear and the RPM is that low, because the 2nd gear is on lower RPMs, the engine would want to go slower, because the engine is at low RPMs. At low RPMs in 2nd gear, the speed that you are supposed to be traveling is below 100, but you are going way over 100. And so the difference in speed that you are going and what the car, the engine and the clutch want you to go is so different that you will get engine braking, which means the engine itself will be trying to brake the car, and the engine can only apply force on the driving axis. So if your car is front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, the axis where you have the drive is where the engine braking will be happening. And this can be especially problematic on rear-wheel drive cars, because you are only braking with the rear tires when you have engine braking, and this can be very easy to lock up the car and to get the rear end of the car loose, and you get the rear end of the car braking way more than you expect when entering a corner, and suddenly you lose completely the grip on the back of the car. This is the most common example and prominent example that you can see on some cars when downshifting, not doing this properly. But there is the solution, which is the heel and toe technique. And why does it work? Because when we do the throttle blip, we are accelerating back the engine, but we are not accelerating the car because we have the clutch engaged. The clutch is engaged and we are just pressing the brake with the right foot, and we give a blip on the accelerator. By giving the blip on the accelerator while pressing the clutch, the engine revs will go up pretty quickly, pretty easy, back into the ideal range. And so when you actually put the second gear and you lift the clutch, the engine will be matching, the engine revs will be matching the speed that the car is going for that gear. And so when you disengage the clutch, you get the car going into second gear much more stable. And then there is levels to this, so you can actually control how much engine braking you use during the entering phase of a corner, depending on how you shift the gears and how you do heel and toe. And that's part of the fun and the magic driving vintage cars and some of the older cars that have a bit less grip, and sometimes you have the gears a bit further apart. The cars have less gears, only have 5 gears. You can have a bit more fun in the way that you drive the car and experimenting a bit when shifting downwards. So one of the things that we can think about is, if we are shifting outside the ideal range for the shift, you can always expect 2 problems. You either lock up the tires because the car will want to go much slower, or you can also lock up the tires because the gear that you are trying to put doesn't have enough RPM to reach that speed. But when you are shifting and you shift a gear too low, let's say you should be shifting into third, but you shift into second, what happens is the car will be trying to go at 10,000 RPM, and this can actually damage the engine. So sometimes when downshifting with some cars, you can damage the engine if the engine doesn't have any downshift protection because of this. You are trying to use a gear that will not produce enough speed at the maximum RPM.
Nope.
And at the same time, the engine will try to reach even higher RPM, and if there is no limiter on the engine before damage, you can actually damage the engine. Now that I've explained you this, I'm going to give you the example of the first thing, which is I'll be locking up the rear tires when entering a corner in the next clip, so you guys can completely understand what happens. So guys, this is already a little bit of foreshadowing for the next clip and the content that we can be using to practice a more advanced heel and toe technique. So in these different contexts, we can go for tracks like Nürburgring, which is one of the most difficult tracks, or Laguna Seca as well. But for this vintage car, we need a little bit more room, especially if we want to race against the AI, because the AI can be really crazy with vintage cars, since these cars have a bit less grip. So I went to Mugello, which has a bit more banked and faster high-speed corners for some fun. And we are going to be driving the Lotus Type 49 from 1967. So this is a vintage car, so it will have less aerodynamic and less grip, but because this is a very high performance formula car, you actually have a very lightweight cockpit and a very powerful engine for the weight the car has. And so we have more than 400 horsepower with a car that barely weighs half a ton. With these settings, and because I'm not used to drive this current track, I'm not going to max out the AI aggression, otherwise the AI can have lots of accidents, and at the same time I'm 1% shy of maxing out the AI skill. I don't even have any idea how I am going to perform against this AI, but I guess I'll find out. So these are the racing conditions that I'm going to have. I think I downloaded a few skins for this car, and this will be the setup that I will be using if you really want to replicate the experience that I'm having here. So that I can showcase what happens by doing some bad shifting. So here I was able to do a little bit of damage into the engine, even though I was doing heel and toe shifting, because the way I was shifting I made the engine rev up a little bit too high, closer to 10,000 RPM. And I think that over 10,000 RPM I would really damage a lot the engine. Let's try. Here you see I revved the engine up to 11,000 RPM and you could hear the engine struggling to keep up because the car was going too fast for second gear and the engine was revving way too high, way higher than it should. So this car is a bit of a handful. Let's see. Here I locked up the rear tires by changing into second gear without doing any heel and toe. Now I'm going to do another bad shift, and as you can see, by shifting into second gear I was able to lock up the rear axis of the car, and that made me spin around. The car is a 60s car and so therefore it will be a bit more challenging. I chose the Mugello track because we have a lot more room and lots of high-speed corners. So this should be a bit more fun experience. On a tight and smaller track we could have a little bit of a struggle with the AI getting involved into too many accidents. And as you can see here, the car is quite the handful to drive. Careful, I don't want to get any contact or damage. Oh, I think I was understeering a bit into another car. These cars are very physical, you have lots of corrections and the force feedback just feels crazy. Because you have tons of inertia movements since the rear tires slide so much around. But the cars are surprisingly grippy for cars from the 60s. So I downshifted into second gear a bit too quickly, and because of that I did a little bit of engine damage. Whoa, now I misshifted. I'm losing a bit of concentration while talking and messing up a little bit on the shifts. I could be a tiny bit further ahead. And the cockpit is just so small, you get such a great sense of speed compared to some other cars. Even when going at lower speeds you get a different sense of speed. Some other guy went off track and we got another position. Got to be careful here, so that I don't crash into this guy. I'm already close to a podium position, close to third position, so these settings are not too far off for an enjoyable race for me. But this is just so physical, such a struggle. The real-life drivers needed to be pretty strong and have a lot of physical endurance to be able to withstand doing a full Grand Prix, driving these cars and surviving lap after lap. bit of understeer and going wide. And I also need to be quick with the shifts in order to actually reach high top speeds. Whoa, big lockup. I wanted to just go a bit hotter into the corner, but I didn't want to crash into the guy in third place. I ended up crashing because he's just coasting or losing so much speed in the corners ahead. Just a tiny bit of contact can be enough to spin you around. Maybe that's why I didn't see many servers with these cars to race online that often. I'm not very experienced, as you might figure out with this car, but I wish I could find more people to race against with some vintage cars. And this is a car that comes from the Assetto Corsa base content, so everyone can find it and give it a try. And especially on this track it's quite fun because you have lots of high-speed corners. I almost destroyed the engine if I had shifted into first gear. Luckily I was able to correct it quite quickly. Now the guys in second and first place seem to be driving on a bit of a faster rhythm because they're not fighting for positions, and they might be driving a little bit more cleanly. This gives me a nice challenge to be able to try to catch up or just avoid losing third position. I'm not sure. I think the guy is not too far behind me. No lockup this time. I wasn't worried about crashing. As you can see, the heel and toe technique provides me with a bit more stability entering corners and gives me some engine braking to help me make the car lose some speed while not really locking up the front tires. So it's a fine balance, almost like magic when you are trying to figure out how to brake more with the front axis or the rear axis in order to get more rotation or less rotation depending on what you need for any certain kind of corner. And I'm already in second place, but first place seems to be really far away. Now it will be a matter of focusing on my own race and focusing on the tire wear and maybe the pit strategy regarding the fuel and tires if this was a longer race. But I have to say, this is a very nice experience, but very physically demanding. And we are going into the last lap. I don't think there will be many more big things happening. Well, I did a little bit of damage to the engine with that aggressive second gear downshift. I could have waited a bit more. And I should be in third gear here. I don't have much power, I think. I think I could have been even a little bit faster, but I'm learning to drive this car on this track, and of course I would need a few long races to figure out a few things regarding how I could improve my lap times and maybe even watch some footage. Maybe I should have had a bit lower force feedback because I'm already feeling a bit tired and this was such a short race. This car is surprisingly grippy for a car from the 60s. I can't believe how much grip I have. Whoa. I'm getting distracted and shifting very horribly. Last big braking zone. Locking up a bit. But I survived my first race with Lotus Type 49 and I even got second place from last into second, so I gained 16 positions. And I ran out of fuel right now. Thank you guys for sticking with me in a little bit of a longer format video with more explanations and more details. I hope this video was helpful to you or any beginner sim racers or even intermediate sim racers that are looking into starting driving with the H-pattern shifter and the heel and toe technique. For me, this has been great fun to try and diversify my driving techniques and starting to drive vintage cars a bit more competently. I hope this video will help other sim racers and that more people will find this information useful so that you guys can actually improve your driving skills and have fun driving older and vintage cars that require the heel and toe technique and the H-pattern shifter. Don't forget to leave your ideas and comments in the comment section down below and leave your like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content. That will really help me out. Thank you very much and see you on the racetrack.